I don't know if this is a good idea.
Oh, come on, it'll be fine. Remember, we have to step out of our comfort zone if we're gonna be better neighbors.
I know, but I hear this guy's a little crazy, real grumpy, and doesn't want to be bothered.
It's gonna be fine. All we have to do is introduce ourselves, give him this pie, and invite him to the barbecue.
See, I told you he doesn't want to be bothered.
He's in there. I can hear his TV loud and clear.
Are you kidding me? Just leave it. Let's go. Leave it. Let's go.
What?
Oh, hi. We're the Smiths. We
You
live
guys
right
do
down
not
the...
look like Girl Scouts, especially
no.
you. What is it that you're selling?
We just would like to introduce
You don't want to talk politics, I hope.
No.
Oh, I just missed the touchdown.
Oh, but... Okay, I'm sorry to bother you. We'll just leave the pie right here. Hope you like it. Oh, sorry.
Well, hey there, Richard.
Hey, neighbor.
Glad you could come over the other night.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. It's not the worst thing I ever did in my life, except for the burgers. Can't believe you burned a burger on a Traeger.
Yeah, well, sorry about that. It was nice of you to come, though.
You know, it's the first time I've ever been invited to something in this neighborhood.
Really? I'm not sure why that is, but we were glad to have you.
Okay. To be honest, I might know why people haven't invited me to the neighborhood stuff. I do close my garage door as fast as humanly possible when I get home. What if my HOA rule reminder notes are offending anybody? No. Is it possible my neighbors don't like REO Speedwagon and Hall & Oates cranked after dark? Okay, sure. Once in a while I toss my dog's poop over the fence of my neighbor's yard, but only when I don't have a bag. Nobody understands Richard. At least my mom loves me.
We were glad to have you. Going on a fishing trip?
You know, I am. I thought I'd go over to the Yellowstone tomorrow, try to catch a trout. You know, I'm the president of the Club 12 Fly Fishing Club.
Really? That's awesome. How many members do you have?
Well, it's just me.
Ah, cool.
Maybe you and I could fish someday.
Hey, let's do that. That would be great.
Yeah, my plan tomorrow is a little fishing, watch a little football, maybe have some dinner with my family.
Sounds like a nice day.
What are you going to do tomorrow?
Well, that's what I was coming by, but it sounds like you're too busy. You got a full day tomorrow.
Oh, no. What were you thinking?
Well, we go to church on Sunday mornings, and I was wondering if you wanted to come along.
Well, I might just do that.
Really?
Yeah. Sounds kind of fun. Then maybe we could go fishing after that, and maybe you'd consider watching the Minnesota Viking game with me tomorrow night.
I'll do that.
All right, let's just see each other in the morning.
That sounds good. I'm excited.
Awesome.
Thank you, neighbor.
Thank you. Hey, it's not a Packer church that you're taking me to, is it?
No, not at all.
All right, I'm in then.
It is not a Packer church, am I right? Oh, maybe a little bit. And my wife is the one that put Christmas music on. That was just like a covenant we made with one another, not before Halloween, and boom, walk in the house, there it was. Week number 7 in our series that we're calling Neighboring. And kind of our big overarching idea around this sermon series is what if? What if we took the great commandment seriously? The great commandment being when Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. He said, that's the most important thing. Get those right and you get everything right. What does it look like for us to do that? To take it seriously, not only seriously, but maybe even literally loving our neighbor, the people that actually live around us. One of the things that I've loved about this series is we've done our best to try to give people very practical application So as I walk around town and talk with people and get emails and texts, people are actually taking us up on those applications, and I love hearing the stories. The last time I was up here, the one thing I asked is just do something. Even if it's small, just do something. I want you to hear an email that I got from a friend. She said this: during the neighboring series, I have been convicted to take on your challenge to just do something, even if it's small. We have lived in our house for 21 years, and there are some neighbors that I don't even know their names. Sure, we recognize each other and may wave to each other, but I certainly don't know them. Challenge accepted. But how do I start? Why not a gift basket? Who can turn down a fun fall gift? At this point, I'm kind of excited, but now the baskets are made, and I need to do what? Actually, walk over to the neighbor's house and talk to them. Last weekend, I got the courage up, grabbed the basket, and walked out into the garage. I stood there for a couple of minutes, looking at the house across the street, and I froze. What am I gonna say to them? I prayed, and I asked for courage and help with the words that I so desperately needed. By the time I reached their front door, my heart was pounding. Can't you just feel that? When I read this, I was just like nervous for her. I rang their bell and I waited, hoping that they wouldn't even answer. Don opened the door, I now know his name, looked at me, the basket in my hands, and said, "What are you doing?" I told him that fall was in the air and I wanted to brighten their day with a fun basket. He called into his wife and told her to come to the door. She looked at me and said, "Why are you doing this?" I said that I had lived across from them for 21 years and I don't even know their names, and I wanted to meet them. We spent the next 10 to 15 minutes talking and learning about each other. By the time I left, they told me we can never move and that we had won the Best Neighbor Award. Did you know that they actually have awards for that? Best Neighbor Award, she won it. Here, I love her response. She said, "I did it. Such a small, simple act. It's a beginning. I look forward to see where things go from here. Thank you so much for the challenge. 1 down, 3 more to go." I got another text back. "I did it again. I met our neighbors now across the street. It's been a tough 6 months for them. They lost 2 family members to COVID. They work for National Geographic and work in the Antarctic. How cool is that? I'm excited for baskets 3 and 4. Bob, a final update, and I won't bug you anymore. I just delivered my last basket. What a blessing to spread some love and kindness to others. Everyone was so thankful for the act of kindness and appreciated the thought. It makes me want to do more for them. Now I'm thinking of what can I do next? It was a great first step. One more thing. Somehow it got brought up at work and I shared with my coworkers about my neighbor gift baskets. This morning I got a text from one of the gals that I work with, and she said it inspired her to do the same for her neighbors. How fun that is to spread love to others. Thanks for the practical application. Yeah, I think that's clap worthy. Absolutely. But it begs the question, what if? What if everybody, like my friend, started to take the Great Commandment seriously and actually reach out and get to know, maybe that's the first step, even just get to know the names of the people that live next to them. Here's what I know would happen. Neighborhoods would change. And when neighborhoods start to change, whole cities would change. Our whole valley would change. There are thousands of people that call Journey Church their home, not just here in the valley, but around the state and even around the world that are listening to us online. What if every one of us took this seriously and reached out to our neighbor? I want to re-highlight something that my friend said in one of her comments. She said, I did it. Such a small, simple act. It's a beginning. I look forward to where things go from here. Thank you so much for the challenge. I think there's a question in there. Where do things go from here? This is a great first step. What are we ultimately trying to do as it relates to neighboring? What is the ultimate purpose? Why are we doing this? Some people might have in the back of their mind, this neighboring thing, this is just some kind of an evangelism strategy. Let me just say this. This is not an evangelism strategy. This is not something that we're doing just so that we can talk to people about Jesus. And let me say this as clearly as I can. If evangelism is your only motivation for reaching out and loving people, you are not going to be a good neighbor. But I also know this to be true. If neighboring is done, and it's done with the right heart, and it's done with the right posture, people will come to know Jesus. They will know Jesus through your life. They will come to know Jesus, who he is and what it is that he's done for them. People will see Jesus. One of the books that has been kind of shaping Brian and I's thinking around this series is a book called The Art of Neighboring. And there's a piece of that book that I wanted to share with you because he talks about what is our motivation for neighboring? What is our compelling why would we do this? And he said there's differing kinds of motivations. And he talked about ulterior motives and he talked about ultimate motives. And when he explained an ulterior motive, you know what that means. It means that we're intentionally keeping something hidden. We're not putting all of our cards face up on the table, and there might even be a little bit of manipulation in it. There's one thing that we're doing out in the public as we're talking with them, but there's something else that's happening underneath in private. You know what the word for that is? It's an agenda. And let me say this, people can smell an agenda, and it does not smell good. People are not projects. The great commandment, I said it earlier, but I'm going to say it again. It is simply this: love your neighbor as yourself. Period. It doesn't say love people so that I get the opportunity to share Jesus with them. And I want you to understand this. We don't love our neighbor. We don't reach out to our neighbor because we want to change them. We reach out and we love our neighbor because we have been changed. Let me say that again. We don't reach out to our neighbor to try to change them. We reach out to our neighbor and love them because we have been changed by the love of God. That is our ultimate motivation. And there's a difference between an ulterior motivation and an ultimate motivation. Let me be clear. When I say it's not an evangelism strategy, we do want people to see Jesus. We do want people to come to know Jesus. I've bet my whole life on the importance of people coming into that kind of a relationship with Jesus. I came into that kind of relationship with Jesus when I was a 20-year-old, and it transformed my life. And I just thought, I've got to tell other people. They need to know Jesus the way he intersected my life. They need him in that same way. That is our ultimate motivation. It's not an ulterior motive. It's not something we hide underneath the surface, but it is our ultimate motivation. But it's an ulterior motive when we're only doing it and only developing relationships to try to share Jesus. We don't love our neighbors to try to change them. We love our neighbors because we have been changed. And that's how God loves people. He loves people unconditionally. He loves people with no strings attached. And if we're gonna experience that kind of love from God, that's the kind of love that we need to extend to our neighbors. But the challenge is, how? How do we do that? How do we help people to see Jesus? Can I tell you one way not to do it? Let's not do it in a way that is preachy, in a way that is forceful, in a way that is trying to cram something down people's throats. Maybe you're one of those people, or you've seen people. There are people that are just so wary of people trying to do that in their life, to jam something down their throat. You can see when the topic of faith comes up, it's just like you just see walls go up. People shut down. People just want to leave the room. If we want to do neighboring the way Jesus did neighboring, if we want to help people to see Jesus, we need to look at the scriptures and see, how did Jesus help people see him? We're going to look at a story from John chapter 9. It's a story about a man that was born blind that Jesus healed. And it's kind of an interesting story because kind of the centerpiece of the story is this healing. But the big idea, what Jesus wants everybody to understand is, although this man was physically blind, it was all the people that were around him that were spiritually blind. They didn't see Jesus either. He couldn't see him physically, but they couldn't see him spiritually. How do we help people overcome their spiritual blindness? Because you can have perfect eyesight in this life and not be able to see Jesus. You can have 20/20 vision in this world and be completely blind to God's vision for your life. But Jesus in this story, he points out all the people that were blind and helps us try to understand what we need to do to see. The disciples were blind. The religious leaders were blind. Even this man's own parents were blind. But Jesus helped them see. First, let's talk about the disciples, starting in John chapter 9, verse 1. It says, as he went along, that he is Jesus, as Jesus went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So Jesus is walking with his disciples. There's this man along the path somewhere, probably someone they had seen before. And it's this opportunity that the disciples see. They want to engage Jesus in a theological question. And they want to understand, why is this circumstance the way it is for this man? But as they ask the question, in a courtroom, you'd say they're asking a leading question. They're presupposing an answer. They're presupposing that the reason that this man is in the situation that he's in is sin. And they just want to know, where did the sin come from? Was it his sin or his parents' sin? Was there somehow that this guy actually sinned in the womb? Was there some way kind of a pre-existence? What is it that caused him to be in the situation that he was? But when Jesus answers the question, he completely rejects their premise. Their presupposition, he's saying, not only is your presupposition wrong, but I'm going to turn your presupposition upside down. And here's what Jesus says. He says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. It was mind-blowing to them because that wasn't their paradigm. They believed that if difficulty, pain, suffering, challenge in this life came, is because you did something wrong, God is angry at you, and you need to get right with him. But Jesus is saying that isn't what it is at all. See, they believed that if good things were happening in your life, it's because you did good things. And if bad things were happening in your life, bad circumstances, it's because you had done bad things. Whatever your circumstances were a reflection of how God felt about you. We think like that too sometimes, don't we? I know that's the case. Maybe not for everyone, but many of you. Because when you're walking through pain and suffering, and I'm walking alongside and I hear people talking about the things that are happening in their life, you know what the question that they ask is? Why? God, why are you doing this to me? What did I do wrong? We have that same kind of cause and effect relationship in our minds often between difficulty and circumstances and God's heart for us. And let me just say this. If that is your belief, it is gonna keep you blinded to who God is. It's gonna keep you blinded to who Jesus is and what he wants to do in your life. Because if you think your life, the difficulty in your life is about punishment from God, is that the kind of God that you're gonna wanna move to in the midst of difficulty? No. You're gonna wanna keep him at an arm's length. Keep him at a distance. And when we keep God at a distance, he becomes blurry and fuzzy, and we don't see him clearly. I wanna do everything I can to break this thinking in us, that our circumstances equal God's heart for us. If that is true, this is what we would have to believe is also true. God didn't love the disciples. You see, their lives were pretty normal. They were fishermen, tax collectors, doctors. They did lots of different things, but pretty normal lives. Their lives got turned upside down when they started following Jesus. They gave their heart to him. But in the midst of that, they came alive, but circumstances in their life were incredibly difficult. Those that were closest to Jesus, those whose heart was most captured by the things of Jesus and his kingdom, had difficult lives. I want you to hear what the Apostle Paul wrote, because the Apostle Paul, he suffered greatly in his incredible service following Jesus. He always was facing difficult circumstances. And this is how the Apostle Paul put it together for us in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, starting in verse 9. He says, but Jesus said to me, this is what Jesus said to Paul. He says, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that, what's the result? Christ's power may rest on me. Doesn't sound really familiar to what Jesus was saying about the man born blind? This has happened so that the power of God might be seen in his life. It's how God works. Paul continues, that is why, for Christ's sake, listen to this. If you didn't know the Apostle Paul, you just think this is crazy talk. This is what Paul says. He says, actually then I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Friends, there are people in this room, there are people that are watching us online, and they just feel weak right now. The things of life are just pounding against them. What Paul is saying, it's in the midst of those times when we feel so weak that it gives us that opportunity to hold up our hands to God, to express our dependence upon him, our incredible need for his grace in our life. And Paul is saying, that's when God shows up. That's why in the midst of our greatest weaknesses, in the midst of our greatest difficulties, God's power can be made manifest in our lives. That's what Paul wants us to understand. That's what Jesus wants us to understand. Okay, that went a little bit long, that first point there. But here's what I want you to understand. I want to bring it back to the concept of neighboring. What does this have to do with neighboring? When you neighbor with people, and when I say neighboring, I'm talking about getting to know people, know their names, know their life, sharing your life with them. Will you do this for me? When you neighbor with people, will you be honest about your life? Will you be authentic about the things that are really happening in your life? Because I talk to enough people in this room, I talk to people that are online. People are going through a lot of pain. People are going through a lot of suffering, struggles and challenges, even people that love Jesus with all of their heart. And you know what? Jesus never promises to take the pain away. Never. People will try to stand on stages and say things like that. If you've got pain, if you've got struggle in your life, it's your fault. You don't have enough faith. It's bogus. It's a lie. Jesus never promised us easy lives. But he did make a promise. I will be with you in the midst of your pain, in the midst of your suffering, struggles, challenges. I'll grab you by the hand and I will walk with you, and my power will be made perfect in your weakness. Can I just say that as you neighbor with people, they need to see that. Yes, there are victories in our life with Jesus, but there are difficulties as well. They need to hear both. And you need to be with them in their pain, in their suffering, in their struggles. They need you to be Jesus with them and for them, grabbing their hand, walking through difficult things in their life. I think about that story that I read earlier. The gal that wrote me about reaching out to her neighbors. The fact that one of her neighbors had 2 family members in the last 6 months that have died from COVID. What do you think's happening in their world? It's an amazing neighboring story in my mind because they opened their physical door of their house to receive a gift basket, but they also opened up the door of their heart and their life and their pain. And I think both of those doors are just as important to walk through. The physical door, getting to know them and who they are, but the emotional, spiritual door into the pain of people. They need people to walk with them, enter in to the pain of people and the suffering of people. They need to see that because that's who Jesus is. That's why people will see Jesus when we do neighboring well. The disciples were blind because they saw this man in the circumstances and this difficulty, and they assumed that he had done something wrong. They were completely blind. But they weren't the only blind ones in this picture. The actual religious leaders in this story were blind as well, maybe even more blind. And they're the ones that should have been able to see. Here's what happened. Just after what I read to you earlier, Jesus kneels down. He spits into the dirt. He makes some mud. He wipes it on the eyes of this man that was born blind, tells him to wash his eyes. He washes his eyes and he sees. This man that everybody there, everybody knows, he's been blind his whole life, and now suddenly he can see. You would have thought this would be the biggest day for Jesus and his followers. Jesus, Jesus. Get him on our shoulders. Let's walk him around town. God's power has shown up in this man named Jesus. Not exactly. That's not what happens. Here's what happens. Verse 13. It says, they brought to the Pharisees the man who had been born blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was the Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He put mud on my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others asked, how can a sinner do such miraculous signs? So they were divided. Here's why they were divided. The religious leaders felt like he couldn't be from God because he had broken one of our rules. Here was the rule that he had broken in their minds, and it was just this one little thing. The miracle happened on a Saturday, the Sabbath. One of the laws, not just any of the laws, one of the big 10, if you remember the big 10 commandments, one of them is remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. The thing that you don't do on the Sabbath is work. So some of the Pharisees are looking what Jesus did, and they said, well, he worked on the Sabbath. Do you want to know why they thought that he had done work? You're going to think this is crazy, but this is true. They had laws around the Sabbath. What was work and what wasn't work? Here's one of the things that they couldn't do. If you spit on the Sabbath, you need to make sure that you spit on a rock. Because if you spit into the dirt, that makes mud. And when you make mud, that's like clay. And when you make clay, that's like making bricks. And that's like making work. It's like, whoa, where in the world did they come up with that? Now, I stand up here so many times, and we always just use the Pharisees and the religious leaders as a punching bag. But can I try to defend them, at least for a minute here, to try to understand, like, why would they do something that to us seems so crazy? These are the people that were in charge of the spiritual life of the nation of Israel. They've watched over centuries. They've watched the nation of Israel do really well and follow God. But they also saw them do really poorly, disregard the commands of God, walk far away from God. They wanted everything in them. They wanted this nation of Israel to do well and to obey God. So it wasn't just the commandments. They were so afraid of breaking the commandment that they said, well, let's make other commandments. Let's make other rules that will keep us from even getting close to breaking the commandments of God. I think their heart in that was probably good. But here's what happens. They became so focused on just the rules. There was this incredible tunnel vision. That's all they could see. Their faith was about nothing more than what do we do to keep the rules? They were so blinded by that they couldn't see the power of God right in their midst. Friends, we can do that too. You sometimes listen to people talk about their faith, and all they're talking about is, you need to do this, you can't do that. This is a command, this is what you need to do, this is what you don't need to do. That becomes the centerpiece of what their faith is all about. They get blinders on their faith. Could I say something that I actually think might be a little bit controversial? You can talk with me about it later because I believe it to be true. God cares more about your heart and even why you do the things that you do, why you choose to obey the commands, than he cares about even keeping the commands themselves. Now, does it matter that we obey God? Absolutely. Do I want to obey God? I want to obey God with everything in me. But I think God cares more about why I do the things that I do. That matters to him. This is what he said to the religious leaders when he confronted them for this very thing, just obeying but not having the heart. Matthew 15, he was quoting from Isaiah 29. He says, these people, they honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Everything looks good on the outside, keeping the rules, doing the things, but the heart. He didn't recognize the heart, and the heart matters to him. Even if there's obedience, the heart matters. He said, they worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. What does God care about? He doesn't just care about the rules. He cares about your heart. Here's what happened with those Pharisees. Everything related to their faith centered around this word, do. You just got to pay attention to what you do and what you don't do. That's what it's all about. That's what makes you right or wrong with God. Can I just tell you, that is not the message of Jesus. He never starts there with the do's and the don'ts. This is the message of Jesus. Done. The message of the gospel, the message of Jesus. You've got to get this, friends. It's not about what you do to make God love you. That's not how it works. It's that God loves you and he's done something for you that you couldn't do for yourself. That's why Jesus came. That's why he stretched out naked on a cross and died for you in your place. So that we could look at God and say, it's not about me trying to please you or getting you to love me, trying to coerce you to love me through my obedience. It's God, you love me. You did what I couldn't do for myself. It's done. It's not due. It's done. That's the message of the gospel. For one, you need that to go to the deepest places of your heart. And the reason that it has to go to the deepest places of your heart is because that's what's gonna come out in your life as you neighbor with people. If you think you need to earn God's love, when you talk with people about what Jesus is like, what God is like, you're gonna get people to think that they need to earn God's love. And it's not the message. It's not due, friends. It's done. That's the message of neighboring. The religious leaders completely missed it, and so can we. But they're not the only ones that were blind as well. Even the man's own parents were completely blind. Verse 18, still refusing to believe that the man had been healed and was truly blind from birth, the Jewish leaders called for the man's parents to be brought to them. So they asked his parents, "Is this your son?" "Yes," they answered. "Was he really born blind?" His parents know that they're trying to back them in a corner. "Was he really born blind?" "Yes, he was," they replied. So they pressed his parents to answer. "Then how is it that he's now seeing?" Give an answer. What happened? Their answer? "We have no idea," they answered. "We don't know what happened to our son. Ask him. He's a mature adult. He can speak for himself." Here was the why. Why were they answering like that? Now, the parents were obviously intimidated by the Jewish religious leaders, for they had already announced to the people that if anyone publicly confessed Jesus as the Messiah, they would be excommunicated. That is why they told them, "Ask him. He's a mature adult. He can speak for himself." What caused them to be blind? Fear. Just good old-fashioned fear. Fear of people. What are they gonna think? How are they gonna respond? There was a lot at stake for these parents. I don't envy the situation that they were in. To be excommunicated from the church, from the synagogue, from the religious community was a big deal. Like here, if you don't like Journey Church, you can go to another church right down the street, probably better than this one. They couldn't do that. The religious community was the center of the whole community. To be excommunicated was devastating to people. Fear. Am I gonna be fearful? Am I gonna be willing to identify myself with Jesus? Think about that story of neighboring when my friend was just in the garage with a gift bag, a gift basket, an opportunity to show love, but there was still, how are people gonna respond? Heart pounding. Could there be rejection? Could there be indifference? Could there be misunderstanding? Sure, absolutely there could be. If we're gonna be the best neighbor ever, we've got to learn to push through our fears and identify our life with Jesus. And now Jesus, there was a reason I believe that he was the best neighbor ever. I think there were a couple things that Jesus understood. Show and tell. You guys remember show and tell when you were a kid? You got to come to school and you got to bring something that you loved. You got to bring something that was meaningful to you. Maybe it was that toy that you got that was so special to you. But what you got to do is you got to stand up in front of everyone and you got to show them what it was and you got to tell them about it. You were so proud of it. That's what Jesus does. Jesus shows and tells. When I say show, this is what I mean. Jesus showed us how to love. Big word here, incarnation. Jesus showed us how to love by leaving heaven, coming to this earth. John chapter 1, Jesus moved into the neighborhood to be with us and to love us and to show us this is what it's like when you love one another. This is what it's like. He showed us how to live out the values of his kingdom. That's why the Gospels are so important for us to read and to live. Jesus showed us. But it wasn't just about showing. He also told. Proclamation. He said with his words, this is what it looks like. This is how you live out the values of my kingdom. This is what my rule and reign looks like in your life. This is who I am. This is what I've done for you. I think there's lots of things that can cause fear. Maybe trying to show love to people, not as much. But when I talk with people about this, what does it look like for us to tell? What does it look like for us to proclaim to people who Jesus is and what he's like? That's where the fear rises to the surface. People think, I just don't know my Bible the way they should. I'm not gonna be able to answer everybody's questions. I don't have all of my theology buttoned up. I just don't know, Bob, what do you want me to tell them? Can I give you one thing? Tell them your story. Just tell them your story. How did Jesus meet you? How did Jesus show up in your life? And like I said earlier, don't gloss over the things that are hard. Don't gloss over the pain and the suffering and the doubts and the fears. Tell all of that, but tell how Jesus showed up in your life, changed your life, and walked with you through that. Tell your story. And you know what else? Listen to their story. Understand what is happening in their life. How God is probably already at work in their life. That's the reason that you're even with them at that moment. It's probably because God has brought you there because he's at work in their life. Listen to their story. Tell your story, but listen to theirs. I love the blind man because he and his parents, they were just getting pressed into a corner. But in verse 25, the blind man, he didn't have anything to say. He didn't know how to theologically, biblically explain what had happened to him. But you know what he did? Just told his story. Verse 25 says, he replied, whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. But one thing I know, I was blind, but now I see. You may not know the Bible the way you want to know your Bible. You may not have all your theology buttoned up. But if you know Jesus, there's one thing you know. You were blind, and now you see. Tell people. Tell people how Jesus did that for you. Show and tell. Are you showing and telling people about what Jesus has done in your life? Because what will naturally happen is we talk about the things that are most important to us. The things that we love come out in our conversations. The way Jesus said it, he says, out of the overflow of your heart, your mouth speaks. What is your mouth speaking about? Does your mouth speak about Jesus to other people in your life, to your neighbors? I'm gonna press a little bit here. I wanna bring a little bit of challenge. If you find in reflection on your life that with the people around you, you're never talking about who Jesus is and what he's done in your life, something's not okay. Let me say this, it might be because you just don't know that person well enough yet. You haven't gotten to the place in the neighboring relationship process where that's the next thing to share about. But if you've known people for a while and they have no idea your story about Jesus and what he's done in your life, can I just say this? It's not that your relationship with them isn't deep enough. It's probably that your relationship with Jesus is not deep enough. You need to go deeper. Talk about the things that matter. Is he your first love? Is he the thing that's coming out in your conversations? Out of the overflow of our heart, the mouth speaks. And maybe it's fear. Maybe it's fear, just like the parents had. But we need to press through fear if we're going to be the kind of neighbor that Jesus wants us to be, if we're going to be the best neighbor ever. You know who make the best neighbors? It's the people that at a deep and profound level have experienced the love and the kindness and the grace of Jesus. Because that's gone down to the deepest places of who they are. That's what comes out. Is that you? Have you experienced that of him? Is he overflowing in your life? Or would you say, not now? Right now, he's not. Right now, you might say, my soul feels tired. My soul feels burned out. Can I just say that this kind God who came to this earth in the person of Jesus, he's offering you an invitation right now to come. Come to him. Are you ready to come? Is it time? Is it time for you to come? Because he wants you to receive. He wants you to be filled. He wants you to overflow. Are you ready? Are you ready to respond to him? Jesus said this. He issued this kind of an invitation in Matthew chapter 11. And I want this to be his invitation to you today, wherever you're at. If you're here on site, if you're watching us online, wherever you are, this is Jesus' invitation to you. Matthew chapter 11, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus says, come. Just come. Are you ready? Are you ready to come? Let's pray. Jesus, we're ready. We need you. We need you to come. We need you to bring rest to our souls. We need to receive from you. We need to allow you to be the one that fills our heart to overflowing so that we have something to give, so that we have something to love with to our neighbors. Jesus, I just pray for my friends that are here in this room, that are listening online, anywhere where they're hearing my voice. I just pray for them. You would help them overcome anything that's keeping them blind to you. Maybe it's circumstances in life that are difficult and challenging, and it makes them feel like you're a million miles away. Holy Spirit, prompt their heart to come. They're ready. People that are just lost and blind by religious rules, they're just grinding it out, doing the things. Everything on the outside looks okay, but their heart is dying on the inside. Jesus, we need you to come. We're ready. For those that are crippled by fear in this life, and it's keeping them from experiencing you, from trusting you and loving people the way you want us to love. Jesus, we need your help to overcome our fear. We're ready. Jesus, we're ready. We're coming to you for help. Jesus, it's in your name that we pray. Amen.
Thanks for listening. We hope this time has allowed you to dig out more of who God has made you to be. If you made some kind of spiritual decision today and are interested in what's next, we'd love to connect with you. For more information or to get in touch, please visit journeyweb.net. If you're interested in supporting our ministry, you can give online at journeyweb.net/give. Thanks.